Kickstart your day with the great taste of Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee, it's a great American company. It's family-owned, and they're all about premium coffee, fresh roasted, and shipped out within 48 hours of roasting. Go to blackoutcoffee.com, promo code PDB, for 20% off your first-time purchase. It's Wednesday, 26 June. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. Let's get briefed. We'll start today with the latest on the Islamist terror attack in the Russian Republic of Dagestan. The Russian government has now raised the death toll in that attack to 20 as authorities continue to investigate who was actually behind the terror event. Later, the European Union is once again on a path to expansion as Ukraine and Moldova have officially launched talks to join the political bloc. And we know one guy named Vladimir who isn't going to be pleased with this report. Plus, the Israeli Supreme Court makes a controversial decision regarding the drafting of ultra-orthodox citizens into the Israeli Defense Forces, a ruling which could lead to a collapse of Prime Minister Netanyahu's government. And in today's Back of the Brief, as Kenyan law enforcement officers land in Haiti, and this is a story we've talked about before on the PDB, in an effort to calm the gang violence there, chaos has now broken out in their own capital of Nairobi. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. We start off in Russia, which is still dealing with the aftermath of an attack by Islamic terrorists in the southern region of Dagestan on Sunday. As of Tuesday, the death toll had risen to 21, following the passing of a wounded police officer in the hospital. The terrorists coordinated attacks on religious sites in the North Caucasus region on Sunday, simultaneously hitting 2 Orthodox churches, a synagogue, and a police outpost. That's according to a report from the Associated Press. The churches and synagogue were set on fire during the attacks, and a 66-year-old Russian Orthodox priest, as well as a church security guard, were killed. As the terrorists attempted to flee, they engaged in various firefights with law enforcement in 2 cities in the province, killing at least 16 police officers. In an update Tuesday, authorities said that another 46 people were injured during the attacks, including 13 police officers. Russian authorities were slow initially to assign blame for the attack in the aftermath on Sunday. Now, while some local officials tried to suggest a connection to Ukraine and NATO, it seemed clear early on that it was carried out by Islamic extremists. It appears that Russian authorities are now ready to accept that conclusion. The Kremlin-backed head of Dagestan announced Tuesday that officials would be conducting background checks on Dagestan's political elite to vet them for any possible links to radical Islam. The decision underscores growing fears inside the region that radical Islamists have infiltrated the government. As we noted on Monday, 2 of the gunmen were identified as sons of the head of a local district in Dagestan, Magomed Omarov. Late Monday, a former mixed martial arts fighter and cousin of Omarov was also identified as a gunman, along with a nephew of the local leader. As the investigation continues, another gunman has been identified as having past links with a pro-Kremlin political party, while another is reportedly the relative of an unnamed former senior official. That's according to CNN. While authorities are still trying to unwind the network behind the attack, clearly they have a systemic problem with Islamic extremism, an issue that Putin has been facing for quite some time. While no group has claimed responsibility for Sunday's attack, a representative for the Russian branch of ISIS-K issued a statement praising the actions of their, quote, brothers from the Caucasus. It's worth noting that Russia's majority Muslim Republic of Dagestan has long been a hub for Islamic extremism. In April, Russian authorities arrested 4 men from Dagestan in connection with the deadly terror attack by ISIS militants on Moscow's Crocus City Hall concert venue, and that was back in March. That attack killed 145 people. While authorities in Russia are acknowledging the attack was motivated by radical Islam, they are desperately trying to downplay any suggestion that there's a broader threat from jihadists. Russian President Putin has been focusing, obviously, the resources of Russia's military and intelligence agencies on Ukraine. And the attack, the 3rd by Islamic radicals inside Russia this year, well, it's another embarrassment for Moscow's security forces. Putin has long claimed that Russia had largely eliminated the threat of radical Islam. Oh, look, it's gone. And that his policies have fostered domestic stability and safety. With attacks on the rise, well, it appears that that narrative is crumbling. Sergei Markov, a former Kremlin advisor, told Reuters, quote, "Radical Islam is again raising its head in Russia. It's clear that there is a problem with Islamist terrorism, and it is very serious," end quote. Well, congratulations, Sergei. You are today's winner of the PDB Statement of the Obvious Award. Keep an eye out for your gift bag. Officials at the Kremlin, however, say they've remained focused on internal threats throughout the war in Ukraine, and that the attacks were not a harbinger of a wider Islamic threat inside Russia. A spokesman for the Kremlin said Monday, quote, "Russia is different now. Society is absolutely consolidated," end quote. They added that Putin was closely monitoring the situation and that a formal investigation into the attack was still ongoing. All right. Coming up after the break, Ukraine and Moldova have initiated formal discussions to join the European Union, marking a significant step in the EU's potential expansion. And a ruling by Israel's Supreme Court on the military draft for ultra-orthodox citizens threatens to destabilize Prime Minister Netanyahu's administration. I'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back. Shifting to Europe's eastern flank, Ukraine and Moldova have formally entered membership talks to join the European Union in what would be a historic reshuffling of the post-Soviet geopolitical order. The membership process formally kicked off at an intergovernmental EU conference, that sounds like fun, in Luxembourg on Tuesday, which Ukraine's prime minister hailed as a historic day that marks a new chapter in his country's relationship with their European allies. As a reminder, Ukraine and Moldova both applied for EU membership in the wake of Putin's invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022. And by June of 2022, the EU had officially made both nations candidates to join the European bloc. And that's according to a report from the Associated Press. The process has been slow, though, ever since, over concerns about corruption and the erosion of press freedom within Ukraine. Hungary, whose leaders maintain close ties with Putin, has also stood in the way at basically every turn. The EU was able to move the needle back in December, however, when they reached an agreement to bypass Hungary and officially open membership talks with Ukraine to join the EU. While those talks are officially underway as of Tuesday, well, the process is expected to take several years at best. Still, it represents a major achievement for Ukraine, particularly as they contend with a renewed military offensive by Russia. Following Tuesday's announcement, the Ukrainian Prime Minister said, quote, "We fully understand that there is still much work ahead of us on the path to accession. We are ready for it. We have demonstrated that we can move swiftly and achieve the impossible," end quote. Moldova, nestled between Ukraine and Romania, also formally entered membership talks on Tuesday. While they have so far been spared from direct fighting, they still face the constant threat of missiles accidentally striking their territory, along with an ongoing energy crisis following Russia's decision to cut gas supplies to Europe. As the process unfolds, Ukraine and Moldova must begin aligning their internal laws and policies with those of the EU, which currently has 27 members. As I mentioned earlier, cleaning up corruption is critical to both countries' hopes of joining the Union. Ukraine hopes to formally join the EU by 2030, but they first have to implement widespread institutional and legal reforms. They'll also need the unanimous approval of all 27 member states, which could prove very difficult, again with Hungary standing in the way. A senior official from Hungary said Tuesday, quote, "We are still at the beginning of the screening process. It's very difficult to say at what stage Ukraine is in. From what I see here as we speak," he said, "they are very far from meeting the accession criteria," end quote. Okay, shifting our focus to Israel. There's been a landmark decision by the country's Supreme Court, which unanimously ruled that ultra-Orthodox Jewish men must participate in compulsory military service. The decision could potentially destabilize Prime Minister Netanyahu's government. This marks a significant shift in policy, addressing exemptions that have been a long-standing source of contention within Israeli society. Israel's Orthodox population, which was once a mere 400, has grown to comprise around 12 to 13% of the country's nearly 10 million people. Founded with an exemption from mandatory military service due to their historical suffering during the Holocaust, the ultra-orthodox community now faces a changing landscape. Their exemption rests on dedication to religious studies and yeshivas, seen as vital to Judaism's survival and akin to national service. In a society where military service is considered a cornerstone of citizenship, exempting certain groups, well, it's become a divisive issue. Their exemption is seen as fostering inequality among Israeli citizens, most of whom are required to serve from the age of 18. The ongoing conflicts, particularly with Hamas in Gaza, has further heightened the division, intensifying the debate over national security needs versus these religious exemptions. Now, this ruling has the potential to destabilize, if not topple, Netanyahu's government. His coalition includes two ultra-Orthodox parties called the Shas and the United Torah Judaism, and they've made exemption from military service a condition of their support for Netanyahu. They've threatened to withdraw from his coalition, which could lead to a possible government collapse and new elections. Orthodox community leaders like Aryeh Deri, chairman of the Shas party, emphasized the critical role of religious scholarship, saying, quote, "There is no force in the world that can disconnect the people of Israel from Torah study, and anyone who has tried in the past has failed miserably," end quote. The decision comes in part because the fighting in Gaza has ramped up the need for more troops in Israel, especially after the urgent call for recruits following the Hamas attacks on October 7th. The IDF mobilized a significant number of reservists, requiring them to serve longer tours of duty, which had a substantial impact on the national economy by drawing many workers away from their civilian jobs. Close to 600 Israeli soldiers were killed in the attack and, of course, the conflict that's followed. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant openly criticized Prime Minister Netanyahu's efforts to maintain exemptions for the ultra-Orthodox from military service. Additionally, IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi has been outspoken about the necessity to widen the conscription, saying, quote, "Every such battalion that we establish, an ultra-Orthodox battalion, decreases the need for the deployment of many thousands of reservists, thanks to the mandatory service people." Israel's Ministry of Defense continues to emphasize its urgent need for all available personnel to combat the militant group Hamas and now the conflict in the northern part of the country with Hezbollah effectively. Okay, coming up in the back of the brief. As Kenyan officers arrive in Haiti to assist with local unrest, turmoil erupts back in their own country. I'll be right back. In today's back of the brief, as the first contingent of Kenyan police land in Haiti to initiate a peacekeeping mission as criminal gangs continue to wreak havoc, well, the Kenyans' homeland erupts in its own chaos. Violent protests, triggered by proposed tax hikes in Nairobi, have led to a deadly confrontation with a number of people killed as demonstrators tried to storm the parliament. The protests are rooted in deep-seated frustrations over the rising cost of living in Kenya, which is considered by many to be East Africa's economic center. President William Ruto, who was elected on a platform promising economic relief, has faced criticism as his administration pushed forward with tax increases. This unrest comes as Ruto is negotiating with international lenders like the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which provides loans to countries facing economic difficulties but often requires them to implement certain economic reforms. Many protesters are particularly upset over what they see as unkept promises about these reforms. Kenyan lawmakers, having just approved a controversial finance bill, were forced to flee Parliament through a tunnel as an angry mob of young protesters breached the building, shouting, quote, "We're coming for every politician." The protesters, aligning with opposition members who voted against the bill, set parts of the Parliament on fire. Violence escalated outside the Parliament as well and in various cities across the nation, with a diminished police force responding with live ammunition and tear gas, killing at least 5 protesters. The Kenyan Human Rights Commission posted a video showing officers firing at protesters and declared that those involved would be held accountable. They also called on President Ruto to intervene directly to halt the excessive use of force. The situation has drawn a stern response from the government, with President Ruto condemning the violence and labeling the incidents as treasonous events. Ruto has 2 weeks to sign the finance bill into law. That's a decision that could further escalate tensions and protests in the country. Of course, the chaotic scene unfolds against the backdrop of Kenya's recent deployment of police to Haiti, where they're tasked with combating gang violence and restoring order. The initial deployment consists of 400 Kenyan officers, with another 600 planned, assuming that they're not needed at home to restore order in Nairobi. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Wednesday, 26 June. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. As you may know by now, to listen to the show ad-free, well, become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. It's a very simple process. I'm Mike Baker. I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.